Everyone hear me?
You sound like Moshe at Mount Sinai. That's how well we hear you.
Wow. Okay. Shall I wait for more or
No, whatever people miss, they'll catch on the YouTube.
gotcha? Okay, we'll begin tonight with the fourth parak of Masechah Shavuos. We are dealing with several types of Shavuos that we've learned so far in these 40 days or so. We started the first couple prakim with Shavuos Bitoy, and then we moved on to more of technical shvuas that are taken regarding testimony and regarding a shvuas hapikadon, which is what we've been learning last week. And this week we started with the shvua that shvuas hadayanim. But I wanted to go back a week or so ago and discuss this concept of shvuas ha'edus. So we'll begin with a Mishnah on Daf Lamed on 30a. The Mishnah says, shvuas ha'edus nohegas ba'anashim v'lo b'nashim. So shvuas ha'edus, which is what we're going to be talking about, is a shvua that one person is mashbia somebody else. What Ruvain basically is looking for help. He has a case against Shimon, and there's a potential witness who can provide testimony. So Shimon is very excited to hear this potential witness. This witness, however, swears that he does not know testimony for Ruvain. Okay, so Ruvain has a letdown. He can't proceed with his case against Shimon. And this potential witness swears. Okay, he swears that he does not know any testimony in this particular matter. Okay, that is called Shvuas Ha'edus. So, because this is only going to be for a potential witness, it could only go on someone who was kosher to be a witness. That's why the Mishnah says, Nohegas ba'anashim v'lo b'nashim. It applies to men, but not to women. B'rochokim v'lo b'krovim. Only people who are not related, okay, to the plaintiff in this case. B'ksherin v'lo b'psulin. Kosher people, and not people who are not kosher. Kosher to be what? Kosher to be witnesses. For example, the classic case is a thief. Okay, a thief is somebody who the Torah does not prohibit, who the thief is someone who is prohibited from being a witness. So therefore, he is excluded from this prohibition of Shvuas Ha'edus. Okay, ve'enu no hagis ela beru'in lahayid bifnei bezdin. And the Mishnah goes on to say that this shvu is only for someone who is capable of giving testimony in front of Bezdin. Or the Mishnah says, V'shalo b'fnei Bezdin mipi atzmo, or not in front of Bezdin, as long as it's mipi atzmo. Mipi atzmo is a technical term for a shvua that this person makes by himself. There's two ways that a witness could take an oath. Either it's administered by the plaintiff, and he says, swear to me that you don't know testimony for my case, or the potential witness says, I hereby swear that I don't know any helpful testimony for your case. Okay, so the second case is called mipi atzmo. And Rav Meir says that when it comes to a shvua that the plaintiff is making this potential witness take, okay, it's only when the kvira is done, it has to be in front of Bezdin, okay? The Chachamim Omer and the Chachamim say whether he does it by himself or whether the plaintiff makes him swear, you're only going to be liable if you, again, what's the chiyuv over here? If you're caught lying, if you lie and say you don't know edus, when you really do know edus, okay? So once you deny it, It has to be in front of Bezdin because Bezdin is where everything happens. Okay, that's the happening place when it comes to testimony. So therefore, that's where it counts. Now we've been saying chayav all the time. You're liable. You're liable what? What happens if you fall into the category of being a potential witness and you swear that you don't know any testimony? What if you lie and you really do know? And then it's found out. V'chayvin al zidon hashvua, you're chayav a korban. Remember how we discussed a couple of weeks back that the first two prakim spoke about a korban ola v'yored, right? Depending on your tax return, depending on how much money you make, is the korban that you bring when it comes to several things. For example, helam tuma, right? Remember, you forgot that you were tameh, and you walked into the Beis Hamikdash, and then you remembered, right? All different types of combinations, and that's helam tuma, or you became tameh and you forgot, and then you ate meat, right? Korbanos. And the other one is a shvuas bitui. And here's another type. This is called another example of a korban olav yored, right? So if you are that you bring it when you are bemazed, which is a very weird concept because usually we think about korbanos are bought when we make a mistake, right? If we forget it's Shabbos, so you bring a korban chatas. Most 98% of korbanos are bought as a kapara because you didn't realize. Here is the one exception, or one of the few exceptions, that it's bought b'mezid. Okay, so that's what we call hizid b'shvua, and the Mishnah goes on to say ve'al shigasa. Mishnah goes on to say ve'al shigagasa im zdon ha'edus. Or the other possibility is that you knew very well that you were lying when you said you didn't know testimony for this plaintiff, but you just were absent for Parshas Vayikra, and you had no idea that you would bring a korban. Okay, so that's another. Okay, that's another case in which you're chayav for. You're still chayav anyway, but the einan chayav and al shigigasa. But what if you were completely shogig on everything? Meaning, you really, when you swore that you didn't know testimony, you really thought that you didn't know, but you realized an hour later that you actually did know. Okay, that's called an anus, right? That's called it's not your fault. You had no idea that you were swearing falsely. Had you known, you never would have sworn falsely. So that is what we call a complete shogeg. And the Mishnah ends off by saying, Umahen chayavin al zdon hashvua korban olav yored. And this is the korban olav yored, which you are liable to bring. Remember, if you could afford it, you bring the animal, or you bring the keves. If you can't afford that, you bring the shnei torim, you bring the two birds. And if you really can't even afford that, then you're stuck with bringing flour. Okay, kemach. You bring a mincha, so like offering. So that's the lowest stage of the korban olav yored. So that's an introduction to this concept of shvuas ha'edus. Let us look at the source. Okay, the source is from Parshas Vayikra, the 5th chapter. Says the pasuk, "V'nefesh ki techeta v'shama kol Allah v'hu eid o ra'a o yada im lo yagid v'nasa avono." Okay, so it's a very bizarre pasuk because it starts off by saying if a person sins, so how does he sin? He heard a kol Allah. Okay, a kol Allah is it literally means a voice of swearing. Okay, and he's an aid. Okay, o ra'a o yada, He's a witness by either having seen something, okay, or knowing something. Im lo yagid v'nasa avono. If he does not tell his information, he shall bear his sin. So it's a very strange pasuk. Uh, so Rashi right away says, what does it mean? B'shama kol Allah, says Rashi, b'davar shehu eidbo, meaning he hears a shvua in something that he is involved with. What does it mean he hears a shvua in something that he witnessed? It says Rashi, shihishbi'uhu shvua, meaning that the plaintiff made him swear on something, right? So without the Rashi, without understanding this pasuk, it's very, very unclear. It's very ambiguous what's going on. So because this plaintiff made him swear, and he made him swear, Rashi ends off by saying, Shim yodea lo be'edus sheya'id lo, that if this person happens to know testimony, he should go and help him. Okay? So that's really what this pasuk is talking about. Okay, a person that is being mashbia someone else, saying, "Hey, you take a shvua, okay, because I think you know testimony. Swear to me that you don't." And if he swears falsely, so this potential witness is basically guilty. So just on a derech drush, if you look at the Rabbeinu Bechai, he says, if you look at the way it's spelled, okay, it's spelled im lo yagid v'nasa avono. So what is lo yagid? It's lamed vav aleph, which is a way of saying im lo yagid, right? The Gemara actually has a halachic drasha that learns from this, okay, that it can't go through a witness, that it can't go through a shliach, or it can't be from the nitbaz's mouth. But the Rabbeinu Bachai says something interesting. He says, "V'yitachen od lomar ki tosefet havav b'milat lo." Why is it spelled out in the Torah? Lamed vav aleph. Yirmos al sheshet yimei breshit. It's hinting to something. What's vav? Vav is 6. So what does 6 signify? The days of creation. Ubalahorot ki mi shekovesh edus lachavero mala alaf akasav ki ilu kabash lahakadosh baruch hu edus shel chidesh haolam shenivra b'sheshes yamim. Right? What is this all about? This is all about testimony. When you're witness to something. So somebody who is kovesh edus, someone who hides something from someone else that could be helpful, it's like you are covering, okay? It's as though you are denying that God created the world. You're being kovesh the edus of the creation of the world that was created in 6 days. Kimitoch she'adam ragil lehikashel ba'avon kal yavo l'sof she'ikashel ba'avon chamor. Because the Rabbeinu Bachai says, chances are if a person does something that he considers very trivial, in the end, he's going to stumble on something that's way more stringent. All right? So you may think that, okay, my friend needs my help. He needs my testimony. I'm going to butt out. Okay? I'm not going to deal with it. So you think that's light? Says no. Says Rabbeinu Bachai, that's why it's compared to you not admitting that God is the creator of the world. So that's pretty chamur. But again, we see that we see that connection on why you have that extra letter vav. It's interesting. Just on another derech drash, I saw usually the Das Zakenim, the Balei Tosfos, gives a very nice interpretation of this pasuk. He says, "Bo re'esha b'kol ha'parshios ksiv shkaga," right? It says kiteshkag, right? Shkaga, right? It says it in all the parshios at the end of Parshas Vayikra in all the paragraphs. The kanu b'shuas bitu lo ksiv shkaga. Here, there's no shkaga because shvuas bitui and shvuas ha'edus, like we said before, there's no shogeg. You're chayav a korban, even b'mezid. Okay, Lomar Lacha, to tell you, Shagadol Ona Shashvua, the sin, okay, of swearing falsely is so great. Shafilu Shagagasa Ola Zadon. All your shagagos are considered zdonos, right? It's like the opposite of Yom Kippur, right? When we do tshuva, all our zdonos become shkagos. Here, it's the exact opposite. Says the Das Kenim V'chen Amar Shlomo Al Titen Es Picha Lahachati Es B'Sarecha. Right. This is a pasuk I believe at the end of Koheles. Don't make your mouth sin to your body. Val Tomer L'fnei Hamalach Ki Shkagahi. V'gam Kishayavo Kodesh Baruch Hu Ladonos Abrios Yadonos Sam Imachashnu Numenafin. Wow. When God judges you, he will include these people that swear falsely together with, excuse me, those who are adulterers and those who are machashvin, who practice witchcraft. Shenemer v'hayiti eid memaher b'machashvin u'b'na'afin u'b'nishba'in b'shmila shaker. Right, that's a pasuk in Malachi, I think, at the end, that we're going to be judged, not we, but the one who swears falsely is going to be judged altogether with these very, very heinous crimes. So we get a little bit right now a feeling of what Shavuos HaEdus is all about. We saw the mission that says who it applies to. Okay, again, it applies to people who could potentially help this plaintiff. So therefore, if you are an invalid witness, there's no reason for you to be chayav because your testimony won't help anyway. It is interesting. We're not going to talk about it that much, but the first exclusion were women. So the problem is, well, not the problem, but the Gemara jumps on right away why women are exempt. And we say, well, they're exempt because they can't give testimony because it says, Vayamod ha'anashim. Okay? And the pasuk says anashim, and we say men and not women. There's a very interesting, but not for now, discussion about why I would think that I need this pasuk when this is actually, we're going to see that this is a mitzvah and women are exempt from time-bound mitzvahs. Okay, that's an interesting sidebar that we will not entertain right now, but just in case you wanted to look it up or follow up on that, why the Gemara thought it was necessary to exclude women from a pasuk, what we call Xeris HaKasuv, when in fact women are always excluded because this is a time-bound mitzvah. Now you're going to say, why is testimony a time-bound mitzvah? Because it can't be done at night. All right. So that's one aspect regarding Nashim, since a majority of the people I see on this year are women. So that's one idea about women. The other discussion is sometimes women are allowed to be witnesses. It's not in a conventional way, like, for example, in a monetary case or in a death sentence case. They can be involved when it comes to Edus Isha, testifying about a woman, right, regarding to let her remarry if her husband died, right, in these weird cases that, if you remember, we learned at the end of Maseches Yevamos, where it talks about sometimes we believe even, I mean that with all due respect, of course, the word even, a woman, and it says even an Eved, right? There are people who usually aren't included in testimony, but we do make exceptions sometimes. So there is a very, very lengthy discussion of, well, if they're believed and they have potential testimony and they hold back, okay, and they lie, would they be chayav for this shvuas ha'edus, right? Because after all, it applies to them, right? This korban only applies to people whose testimony could help. So if a woman's testimony could help, there is a discussion, just to let you know, about whether they would be included in this chiyuv or not. So I wanted to see a related Gemara that talks about this concept of helping out people and putting your nose in somebody else's business. That's where I really want to get to. Okay, so let me open up Bava Kama. We did this If you remember those in Daf Yomi World, it was the end of December, about a year and a half ago. We were doing Hakones, and the Gemara in Hakones, Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis. We're in Bava Kama 55b. Okay? The Gemara says, Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yehoshua, Arba Dvarim Ha'osa Osan Pater B'dinei Adam L'chayev B'dinei Shamayim. Okay, this is a semi-famous Gemara where we're introduced to a concept we'll call grama. Grama is when I do something, when I do damage that's indirect. Okay, there's several ways I could damage you. I could go out and just, break your window. Okay, that's called directly. I could steal $100 from your pocket. Okay, I directly damage you. There's no debates, right? That's it. Then I could do something. I could put a nail, okay, under your tire, and then when you go in reverse, you get a flat tire. Okay, that's indirect, right? It's not something to be proud of, but I didn't exactly damage you like I would slash your tires directly. I left something and you did it. Okay. Then there's something in the middle called garmi. Okay, we're not going to talk about that now, but this discussion that we're going to have actually has a lot to do with garmi, but maybe we'll save that for some other time. So we're talking about now grama. Okay, so the Gemara is going to give 4 examples of something that if you do it, you're technically pater b'dinei adam, meaning you can't get sued. Okay, you can't get sued by your friend if he causes damage done indirectly, okay, because they're grama. So one is haporetz geder b'bnei behemas chavero. If I take down my neighbor's fence and then the animal runs away, right? You didn't actually steal the animal. You certainly were an accomplice, okay? And because the animal ran away thanks to you opening up the fence, you are causing a grama. That's the first case. The second case is v'hakofef kamaso shel chaver pnei hadlika. If you see a fire spreading and you turn your friend's grain in the direction of the fire, okay, you're right. You didn't start it, but you're certainly helping, right? You're assisting in damaging your friend's grain. The third case is v'hasocher edei sheker lahaid. If I hire false witnesses, okay, to testify for someone. And the fourth case, which concerns us, is v'hayodea edus lachaver ve'enu me'ed lo. Okay, if I know testimony, okay, on my friend, and it could certainly help him, and I don't, so what have I really done? And this is what Shavuos HaEdus is all about. That's why when the plaintiff knows that there's someone out there who could potentially help him with critical evidence, and the person says, I'm not interested, so you technically lose your ability to collect the money. Now, true, it's 2 eidim. We'll discuss whether it's 1 eid or 2 eid, but assuming that it's 2 kosher witnesses don't want to participate, okay, so they've indirectly caused the plaintiff a loss because now the plaintiff can't continue with his suit. So therefore, you're pater b'dinei adam and you're chayev b'dinei shamayim. So the Gemara on the next daf on Nun Hey, Nun Vav Amud Aleph, if you remember, goes through all 4 cases, and the Gemara says, well, let's analyze each of the cases. So when it comes to the 4th case, v'hayodea edus lachaver ve'enu me'ed lo, the Gemara says this is a weird case because b'may askinan ilema b'beitrei. So if I'm talking about, let's give the case, Ruvain has a call out for witnesses to help him, okay, in his lawsuit. And he calls out Shimon and Levi, and they don't participate. So if we're talking about 2 potential kosher witnesses, the Gemara says, Pshita, of course you're chayiv in dinei shamayim. It's a sin. The oraisahu. This is a cardinal sin, okay? It is mentioned in the Torah, im lo yagid v'nasa avono. Okay, it says the pasuk that we just looked at before, that if you know testimony, you have to say something. So why do I need this brisa to tell me that you're chayiv b'dinei adam? Of course you are. It's obvious. So the Gemara answers, no, ella bechad. No, the nuance over here is that there's only one potential witness. Okay? So because there's only one potential witness, the maximum damage that this potential witness could cause Ruvain, the plaintiff, is the fact that the person who Ruvain is suing now cannot or does not have to pay Ruvain because there aren't two witnesses. One witness means that this person that Ruvain is suing now has to swear. And people actually cared about swearing back then, right? So therefore, he wasn't going to swear falsely. So chances are he probably would have paid. So this one witness is indirectly causing damage because now Ruvain loses the potential of the defendant swearing to him. Okay? So that's the chiddush of this brisa, okay? That even one witness will be on the hook for im lo yagid v'nasa avono. Now, Rashi over here says, when the Gemara asked the question, when we learned in the Havamina that we're talking about two witnesses, Rashi says, im lo yagid, what does the pasuk im lo yagid mean? Okay, im lo yagid, Rashi says, betray kamishtai. Im lo yagid is talking about two witnesses, even though it says in Lashon Yachid, it's referring to two witnesses. Midakapid ahagada, since the Torah cares about the witnesses telling their testimony, mash mashi'ilu megidin mischayev zemamon. If these two witnesses would participate, then the defendant would automatically have to pay the plaintiff because the case would be over. So if two witnesses say, we don't have any edus, we don't know what you're talking about, we weren't there when you claim that you lent this money to Shimon, and they end up lying, so therefore it's obvious from Im Lo Yagid that they are responsible for Ruvain's loss. Then Rashi goes on to say, V'od Kaimalan, and the proof further that even though it says it in singular term, Lashon Yachid, the truth is, if you remember, Kol Makom Shenemar Eid Harekan Shnei Eidim. Ad Sheyapar Lacha Kasav Echad K'dichsiv Lo Yakum Eid Echad Beish. Rashi goes on to say, and says, not only that, my proof is that just because it says Eid, it doesn't mean two. Eid, it doesn't mean one, I'm sorry. Eid could actually mean two. Okay? And that's a concept. So it sounds from Rashi that Rashi is very hung up on the fact that because it says it in Lashon Yachid, it could still be Lashon Rabim. But if it was an Eid Echad, right, and this is the key point, I mean, we're getting a little lumdish over here, which I don't typically do in these shirim, but there's a very obvious question that the Gilyon Hashas, Rabbi Akiva Eger, picks up. He says, wait a second, if it was one aid, it wouldn't be obvious that this one aid is causing Ruvain a loss? So says the Gilyon Hashas, Tamuali, just because there's not two aid and there's only one aid, he could still have power because one aid helps, right, the plaintiff in that the defendant now has to swear. And therefore, if that one aid, okay, doesn't participate, says the Gilyon Hashas, chayav korban shvua. He's guilty enough that he would still be a chayav a korban shvua. Kedarin and b'shuas reish parak dalid hakol modin be'eit sota. So he brings up an interesting case. What's the case on daf? If you remember daf lamed beis, last week's daf, it was the first daf on Shavuos Day, on Tuesday, where over there, Abaya has a case, a very interesting case. If you have a sota, okay, how is a sota created? A sota is created when the husband has two edim on the kinoi, on the warning and 2 Eidim on the stira. Okay, so far so good. Okay, the sota is born because she was warned in front of 2 witnesses, and then she secluded herself, witnessed by 2 other witnesses. So now she's a full-fledged sota. So right now, the husband basically wants to divorce her, but the most important part of the case is that it all comes down to money, right? She's got $1 million ksuva, and the last thing in the world that the husband wants is to pay the ksuva. So even if she's a sota, she may get out of it. She could drink the water, and maybe because she has some merit, she may live and not blow up, and the husband is stuck married to her. However, if you have an aid tuma, if you have another witness after she was warned and after she secluded herself, if you have one witness who witnessed the deed, we'll call it, not 2 witnesses, one witness, that's enough to cause her to lose her ksuva. So the husband goes over to this witness and says, I think you saw them together, right, in a hotel that night, right, through the window. And he doesn't want to testify, so he's the last person standing between the husband and $1 million. So he's going to cause his husband $1 million loss. Okay? Now, even though he's an Eid Echad, so we see that an Eid Echad is very powerful. So if he decides to lie and say, I never saw anything, and meanwhile he really did, he himself would be chayav a korban shvua, even if there aren't 2 Eidim. So 1 Eid is believed. So the Gilead Hashas has no idea why Rashi is harping on that you usually need 2 Eidim. Okay, that's a very lumdish aside point. There's no answer to that question, at least no answer provided. But we see that's one aspect. Now the other aspect, which we're going to focus on, which kind of opens the door to the broader topic, is the question that Tosfos asks. Tosfos says, hold on a second. The Gemara asks the question. It's obvious that that you are chayav b'dinei shamayim because the pasuk says im lo yagid. Now Tosfos says, I don't understand something. V'im tomar hani mili kisha'avar al shvuaso kidirse v'shama kol Allah. He says, look at the pasuk. What are we focusing on? The beginning of the pasuk or the end of the pasuk? The end of the pasuk says, correct, if you don't give testimony, then you shall bear your sin. But the beginning of the pasuk says that what? You only bear your sin when you lie on your shvuah. So what's the problem over here? Is the problem lying and taking the shvuah that you don't know edus? Or is the problem just not cooperating, i.e. minding your own business and not getting involved in someone else's lawsuit? That's the question over here, right? And if you look at the pasuk, it kind of hints that that's what the problem over here is. It's not just minding, it's you're only chayav the korban when you lie, then you're chayav the korban. But who says that just not getting involved is a problem? Okay, that's a very, very big question on this Gemara. Because it says you're pater b'dinei adam, right? Because it's a grama, that I understand. But why are you even chayiv b'dinei shamayim? Why is God going to get you in the end? Just because you didn't want to get involved, right? Again, you didn't lie, you didn't swear falsely. So this is a very, very important Tosfos in understanding this whole concept. And his answer is, V'yesh lomer dehachikam markra. He says, Tosfos says, this is how to understand this pasuk in Vayikra. Kishaover bedavar she'im lo yagid hayanose avon. If you would be over, if you would violate something that if you don't say, then you are no se avon, as yavi korban shvua. You're right. You bring a korban shvua when you technically put your hand on the Bible and you swear falsely. Then you're chayav a korban. What if you don't swear falsely? Avablo shvua nami ikanesias avon. So this is the highlight of Tosfos, saying that what? That even without your swearing, Just by not participating and helping out a fellow Jew, you are also violating the commandment. Okay? Big, big, big chiddush. And he brings a proof from the Mishnah in Sanhedrin Daf Lamed Zayin. Who remembers that from a few months ago? Sanhedrin Lamed Zayin talks about, the Mishnah says, Ketzad ma'aymin es ha'edim. Remember this at the end of the 4th chapter, right? The Mishnah goes on to describe how this process of bringing the witnesses to court, and basically how would we basically scare them to death and say, your witnesses, you got to be honest. And then they read them a whole riot act. And they say, that what it goes back to the Mishnah says, they read him the whole history of the world, not the Mel Brooks version, the real version, where Cain killed his brothers, right? And then it went on to haunt him. And then it says, if a person dies for no reason, it's like you destroy the whole world. And they go on and on and on and on, and they give him a whole speech. And at the end, the Mishnah says, after a potential witness heard everything, who in the world would ever want to be a witness to something and have to go through something if it's like he's not gaining anything, he's not scoring any points, right? So the Mishnah at the end says, V'shema Tomru, right? This is Lamed Zayin Amid Aleph on the bottom. Now we go to Lamed Zayin Amid Beis. V'shema Tomru, Ma lanu ulatzara hazos. Why would anybody, and Rashi adds in, why would anybody lahachnis roshenu b'da'aga hazot afilu ala emes? Even if you are 100% true, and you know for sure that this happened because it happened right in front of your eyes, why would anybody go out on a limb to help anyone after getting this riot act read to them, right? V'halo kvar nemar v'hu edo ra'a o yada im lo yagid. So the answer is because it's an obligation, Rashi says, Alechem mutal chova unasiat avon im lo tagidu mashiri item. It is a sin, a major sin, okay, if you do not butt in, okay, and help someone to provide testimony for what you saw. Okay, so we see a little proof as the Tosfos's answer that says basically what? Correct. When is the chiyuv of korban shvua? You have to bring this korban if you're caught if you're caught lying falsely. That's granted. But the chiddush of the Gemara is you're even chayiv b'dinei shamayim even without swearing falsely. So the question is, what kind of mitzvah is this, and who would ever want to do it? So for that, you know where we're going next. We're going to go to our mitzvah machine, the Sefer HaChinuch, and we're going to look at mitzvah number 122. Okay, if you remember from a few weeks ago, we did mitzvah 123, which is the Korban Olav Yored. Mitzvah number 122, if I could open it. Safari is not opening for me. It's not nice. Oh, yes, it is. Okay. Let us look at 122, I believe. Sefer HaChinuch. Here we go. Mitzvahs Edus. Lahagid ha'edus lifnei hadayanim, to say over the testimony, what is this mitzvah all about? Is to say over testimony in front of judges, b'chol ma shenedehu, in anything that we know of, ben sheyischayev be'edus misa, o mamon hamuad alav, whether it's serious stuff, right? Again, you saw your friend b'machal Shabbos, you saw him do avodah zarah, right? So now you have to go to Bezdin, and you have to testify. Okay? Or whether you are saving his money or his life. You're either on one side or the other side. If you know edus, you have to go to Bezdin. Shenemar v'hu edo ra'o yada im lo yagiv v'nasa avono. B'chol inyan chova. In any type of obligation, in any type of matter, it is a chova, it's an obligation. Aleinu anos lahagir ha'edus lifnei Bezdin. Okay? To say edus only in front of the court. And I didn't read the end of that Tosus and Bava Kama, but if you look at it, you'll see that the whole chiyuv is only in front of courts. That's where everything takes place. It has to be bifnei Bezdin. And then the chinuch goes on to say, "V'ulam chiluk yesh ben dinei mamonos adinei nafashos u'sharasun shebetorah." There is a difference, however, says the Sefer HaChinuch, between dinei mamonos, between monetary law, and capital punishments. Shebedinei mamonos ein adam chayiv lahayin alehen ma'atzmo elim ken yitvaenu bal hadavar o bezdin. Because when it comes to dinei mamonos, a person only has to go if he's asked. Okay, that's the key point we're going to see later on also. That there has to be a request, what we call today a subpoena. Okay, if you're asked to come and testify to someone, you have to comply. That doesn't mean that you have to volunteer. It just means that you have to comply if you are asked. However, as opposed to din and afasha, something more stringent, usha'arisun shebetorah, pion shara echad sha'avar haliser. I see my friends, okay, eating something not kosher. V'chen be'edos nefashos. Or if it comes to something I saw my friend murder someone. Shara mishaharak chavero. O be'edos makos. Shehika ha'echad as chavero. Okay? If I saw my friend punch someone out. B'chol zeh chayav ha'adam lavo ma'atzmo u'lahagid ha'edus lifnei ha'bezdin k'dei levar hara u'lahafrish ha'asar ha'adam me'isr. Very, very difficult mitzvah, I must admit. I have to go and rat someone out to the Bezdin if I see my friend doing something that incurs malchus, that incurs kares, something that he's doing wrong. I can't wait to be invited. I have to go proactively in order to be mava'ir the ra, in order to destroy the evil and to separate this person from the isser. Okay, so the chinuch makes a very, very interesting distinction between a dinei mamanos versus dinei nefashos. Now, what's the reason why we have this very, very bizarre mitzvah? He says there's a great benefit to people, meaning someone needs help. Right. So as the saying goes, if you see something, say something. Right. Maybe that's where we got that line from. Right. It's a toelas gedola. Therefore, says the chinuch, ein tzarich laharich bahem ki yeduan hadvarim lechol ro'ei hashemesh. He says it's not necessary to write about this because this is as obvious, right, as the daylight, or to those who see the sun. Meaning, it's your help. In the words of the Ramban, I don't have it down, he calls it a gemilas chasadim. Okay, it's actually goes into the category of doing someone good for something, right? Doing someone good for someone. The problem, though, is, well, there's two problems. The first question is it's a very strange pasuk because it ends off by saying, Im lo yagid v'nasa avono. If the Torah wanted to promote Gemilas Chasadim, it would say, hey, go and testify for someone. Why does it phrase it in the negative? Right? Usually we don't have that. If this is a proactive mitzvah, especially the chinuch said, go out, don't even wait to be right invited or get a subpoena. You go out and you do, and you go testify. Why is it phrased in a negative? And so I heard this word a long time ago because of the nature of this mitzvah. It's a very, very difficult mitzvah. After all, right, what am I doing? I'm inserting myself in someone else's business. So you could call this a gemilas chesed all you want to the plaintiff, but the truth is it takes two to tango. So while my testimony is helping Ruvain, on the other side, it's not helping Shimon. So I'm really, right, giving Shimon, right, bad news because I'm helping Ruvain. So that's why this is a very, very, very strange mitzvah, right? It's one thing if, maybe the IRS is suing you or some government or some other agency that we don't really care about, right? Then great, go help someone defend themselves. But if it's between two people, what's good for one, assuming it's a zero sum game, what's good for one is not going to be good for the other person, right? So that's why this is a very, very bizarre. That's why the Torah says it in a negative, because you would think, why am I getting involved, right? How many times have we gotten involved in trying to help other people and right, it's they call it the road to good intentions, right? We know that more often than not things never turn out the way it's supposed to, and we always regret, right, when we get involved in other people's business. So why in the world is the Torah so insistent on us getting involved when after all someone is going to suffer? So that's a very, very difficult concept. So, and if you think about it, just on a social, just from a social standpoint, whether this is something that's commendable or not, I was looking at a couple of articles. I forgot which magazine this is from one of these psychology magazines that I frequent, especially on Tuesday night. The article says, why is it so hard to stay in our lane and mind our own business? If you have people pleasing tendencies, other people's struggles can bring up an urge to fix or rescue them from themselves. When you become aware of some drama brewing, it triggers anxiety over what they're thinking and feeling and how their problems might end up impacting you, drawing you in like a whirlpool. In her book, A Deeper Wisdom, self-help author Patricia Lynn Riley calls this phenomenon, maybe you've heard of this, it's called swirling. She says a swirl is any relationship, person, activity, or project outside of oneself that becomes the controlling or organizing focus of one's time, energy, and attention. Put simply, if you have a subconscious belief that other people's emotions are your responsibility, the prospect of other people experiencing difficult emotions triggers a desire to feel some kind of control over the situation. Overthinking, meddling, and judging are all ways our brains try to feel like we're in control, even when we're not. Other people's drama can be exhausting. So why do we get sucked in? And she ends off by saying, it turns out we've evolved this way. We are all relational beings. Other people's problems tend to reflect and validate our own humanities, says counseling psychologist Dr. Maddie Saunders. Relational beings need connection, and so it's comforting to know that other people experience similar life issues. It helps us feel less alone. Because we have this deep need to feel like we belong, other people's lives are incredibly interesting to us, and there's an urge to compare ourselves with others to measure how well we belong to the group. It's called social comparison theory. It suggests that people derive an important aspect of their worth based on how they compare to others, explains Dr. Maddie. So you see it more on a just someone who likes to be in other people's business. But I think that it's a very you know nogea regarding this also, because how many times do we see that we feel that we want to help someone, and then we're like, well, maybe we shouldn't get involved because after all it backfires. But you see, the Torah goes out of its way to put it in a negative, right? Not just go out there and give edus. If you think about not giving edus, then you shall surely, right, be nosei avon. So very, very interesting concept. So what's the halacha today? Meaning, how do we deal with this today? So let's look at the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, let's see how practical this is. So the first Shulchan Aruch I saw, believe it or not, in Choshen Mishpat, says Adam Rashai lahachrim bebeis haKnesses al kol mi sheyodea lo edus shehavu v'yayid. Ready for this? Says the Shulchan Aruch, a person could put a cherem on anyone he wants in the shul, right? On someone, on anyone who has potential testimony for him to come and testify. So he basically makes an announcement and says, I have a case with so and so, and I need witnesses to step up that I lent him $10,000 because he's denying it. I know somebody in this shul has potential edus for me. So he could actually put a cherem in shul on someone who doesn't step up. Very, very interesting. So that's one halachic aspect. The second one that is going to dovetail into the last Gemara of the day we're going to see is a halacha. It's in the next siman, the next sif in Shulchan Aruch, in Choshen Mishpat. It says, Kol mi sheyodea edus l'chavero. Okay, if I know testimony for someone, v'ro'i laha'ido, okay, and that person is fit to be a witness, v'yesh l'chavero to'eles be'eduso, and there's a reason, okay, he's obligated to testify in court, im yitba'enu sheya'id lo. Again, this is what we said before, right? Those are the key four words. If he's asked to. So a person does not, very, very important distinction, a person doesn't have an obligation to volunteer information unless he's specifically asked. He doesn't have to, right? He doesn't have to be a hero and volunteer unless he's specifically asked. But once he's asked, he has to step up to the plate. Okay? Interesting. This goes back to the Eid Echad discussion that we had in Bava Kama, whether he's one aid, okay, whether he's by himself, v'im kava sheiduso, and if he denies knowing anything, pater b'dinei adam v'chayev b'dinei shamayim. Very, very interesting Ramah coming up. He says, Hege v'eid echad lo ya'id el b'devar mamo. When should an Eid Echad step up, right? Okay, we want to be these great, nice vigilantes and gemilas chasadim and rah, let's help Jews. That's only when it comes to monetary items. El b'davar mamo. Shemei v'echad l'dei shvua. Right? Like we discussed. I am a single witness. Because there aren't two witnesses, I can't force Shimon to pay Ruvain. I can, however, force Shimon to take a shvua to Ruvain that he doesn't owe him the money anymore. And if he really does owe the money, chances are he's not going to swear falsely. So this one aid has strength. So that's when it comes to Dinei Mamanos. Oh, B'davar Isser. Or when it comes to an Isser, V'afarushi Me'isura. One person could testify, right, to separate someone from an Isser, right? Forbidden, something forbidden. Avalin kvar na'asaha Isser lo ya'id. What if he did the Isser yesterday? And I know that there aren't two witnesses, there's only one Id. Can I go to Bezdin on Tuesday and say, yesterday on Monday, I drove by and saw this person eating in Burger King? So the question is, what am I accomplishing by that? The act is done already, right? And I'm one witness. So what can I possibly do? Says the Ramah, lo ya'id, de'enu ela kamotzi shemra al chavero. So this is where this topic, again, if we had another hour, we'd go on and see where this intersects with motzi shemra, which we brought up once already, recently, and lo samir al dam reyecha, helping your fellow Jew. Okay, because this is a very, very interesting topic that goes into two other related topics. Then he says, "Va'asur la'adam lahayi b'davar she'ena yodea," and the Ramah ends off by saying a person can't testify something he has no idea about. He says, you know what? I know you don't know, but just go stand with that witness. So that way it'll look like I have a lot of help. I have a lot of witnesses, backing me up. So we say that's a no-no. But I just want to do a quick Gemara in the next 5 minutes. One of my favorite Gemaras in Arbe Psachim, because we were talking all the time about the importance of helping out. And believe it or not, the way the Gemara describes someone who could potentially help someone and doesn't, you ready for this? I'm reading from Psachim 113b, 10th line from the top. Shlosha HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ohavan. 3 people God loves. So, Misha Enu Koes, someone who's very calm and doesn't get angry. Number 1. Number 2, Misha Enu Mishtaker, someone who doesn't get drunk, someone who could control their liquor. Umisha Enu Ma'amir Al Midosav, my favorite, and someone who is not Ma'avir Al Midosav. We could talk about this for an hour. I'll just summarize what it means. Someone who is very, very calm and can dish and can take it and not dish it out. Those are rare qualities in a person, to be able to take it and not dish it. Those are the 3 people God loves. Who are 3 people God hates? Shlosh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Sonon, Hamadaber Echad B'Peh Ve'echad B'Lev, a faker. Second one, V'Hayodea Edus B'Chaver Ve'enu Me'edlo. Wow. Like we've been talking about the whole time. V'Haroa Dvar Erva B'Chaver U'Meid Bo Yechidi. Or I know testimony about someone, and I'm going to go and I'm going to snitch him out. Remember what the Ramah said? It's too late already, and I'm only in Ed Echad. So what am I going to accomplish? I'm not going to accomplish anything. And the Gemara gives a famous story, which we did a couple of years ago, but we'll do it again. Kihad Tuvia. This is the famous Tuvia. Chata. Tuvia sinned. Va'asa Zigud L'chude Va'asid Bey. Zigud went to Bezdin and said, hey, I'm an aide. I'm a witness. So they went in front of Rav Papa, Nag de Zigud. So Zigud, who was the witness, Rav Papa gave him Malchus. Amarle said Zigud, Tuvya Chata v'Zigud Mingud. Okay, we had this line in Makos about a month ago, if you remember. Tuvya sinned and I'm getting punished. Amarle in. Yeah, Rav Papa said, you can't squeal on him. You served no purpose. Tichsev lo yakum erechad beish. Va'at l'chudech asad bey. 1A doesn't help. It helps regarding a shvuah. It helps regarding other things. But what you did was fruitless. Therefore, you are doing nothing other than Motzi Shemra. And therefore, Motzi Shemra, I'm going to give you Malchus, says Rav Papa. Okay, and that's where the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah got his source from. But you see over here, God, again, you would figure who would be on a list of people that God hates. Yeah, it's an agadata. We don't know exactly what it means. You'd figured someone who is a murderer, or someone who does avodah zarah, right? We spent the last few months learning about the most heinous crimes possible in our religion. You would figure that God hates them. But what made the list of the top 3 is someone who knows Edus. I'll read it again. Misha v'hayodea edus b'chavero ve'enu me'edlo. So, wow, 9 o'clock. Okay, that's all we're going to do. But yeah, deep stuff. Any questions?